Ever since I was a teenager I have had very intense fantasies about having sex with a giant roach. It started in 9th or 10th grade when we read The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. As I started to think more and more about the roach creature that the character had become, I started to imagine what it would be like if a woman turned into the roach instead. I found this idea very arousing. I would not be repulsed or frightened of her, as the characters in the story are. I would take care of her. Then my thoughts started to get sexual with the character. Eventually I sort of dropped the bit about her having been a human woman first, and I kind of imagined this fictionalized roach species. They are giant roaches, the size of a person, and have complete intelligence. I kind of over time conjured up an imaginary friend of sorts. She was one of these roaches and her name was Ogtha. I would fantasize about her often. Whenever I masturbated I'd be imagining elaborate scenarios of me and Ogtha making love. When I started to have actual sex, I found I could not, perform, if I wasn't thinking of Ogtha. So basically now, anytime I have sex with a woman, I am pretending that she is actually Ogtha. Not just think about Ogtha, I concentrate intently to visualize that I actually am doing Ogtha. I don't want to think about the girl at all. There is only Ogtha. Of course this sex can never be as exciting as my fully imaginary sessions with Ogtha. There are things that are multiple appendages and antennae allow for that a human woman can never match. So anyways, I've been in a relationship with my girlfriend for about a year. 3 or 4 times I have tried to have sex with her and not pretend she is Ogtha, but I just can't do it. So essentially every time we have sex I am imagining she is Ogtha. I finally confided this to her the other day, and I was blown away by her reaction. I thought she might take it a bit badly at first but that she'd get used to it. No. I have never seen such a look of disgust before. Outraged is not an understatement. She is not even returning my texts now. I am afraid she is actually going to break up with me and also that is going to tell people about Ogtha. I don't know how I will face anyone. This is going to sound silly but I also feel guilty about feeling shame, as if Ogtha will be saddened by this, even though I know she is imaginary. I just don't know what to do at this point. Edit, the Reddit user C1 was kind enough to speak my post into a YouTube video. He asked I put it in my post. I did this because I do think an audio can be good. I do appreciate being placed on YouTube. Hello, 5 years ago I submitted the story of me telling my then girlfriend that when we made love I was envisioning her as a giant roach. The gist of the backstory is that ever since I was a teenager I have fantasized in my head of making love to a giant roach, a roach the size of a person. Eventually I concocted an entire backstory and personality for this imaginary roach, who I named Ogtha. Whenever I would engage in private pleasurable deeds, if you know what I mean, I would imagine in my head vivid and elaborate scenarios with Ogtha. It got to be I could not perform with an actual partner unless I pretended they were Ogtha. You might think of the scene in Blade Runner 2049, which my original Tifu predates by the way, where the main character makes love to a prostitute, but his hologram girlfriend kind of holograms over the body of the actual person, so he can pretend he is making love to his hologram. That is what it was like with me and Ogtha, but instead of a hologram it was just my imagination. In the 5 years that have passed since this topic was posted, I decided to stop fooling myself and I just committed to the love of Ogtha. I know she is not real per se, but in my head she is an actual personality. And I am in love with that personality. I don't care if she is a roach or if she is imaginary, the love is real. Call me deluded, but it's harmless, it makes me happy. I have not had a real girlfriend again since that incident 5 years ago, but occasionally I have had one-night stands via online apps, with the understanding of it being one night in advance, and on these times I always envision the woman as Ogtha, my sensual roach queen. Now, I mean no offense to the women of course, and even a gentleman once or twice, the many appendages of Ogtha make translation to human gender almost irrelevant, I just envision they are Ogtha. And no, I have never confided to them about it. I learned my lesson. The thing about it though is that I became so in love with my Ogtha that I married her. I even did a little ceremony in my living room. I recited my own vows, and she recited hers. I even went on a honeymoon, which technically you could say was a solo vacation to New Orleans for a week, but in my mind Ogtha was with me the entire time. In my mind I think of her as my wife. Now here's where I fucked up. I got so used to thinking of her as my wife in my head, that a few months ago at work I nonchalantly said my wife in some innocuous sentence. I think it was something like oh yeah me and my wife love that show in regards to Chopped. So now everyone was asking me about my wife, because they had never heard I was married or even dating anyone. Everyone kept pestering me. Wanting to know about her. Wanting to see pictures. I became full of panic. I did the one thing I swore I would never do again. I talked to other people about Ogtha in real life. We were at a team lunch, and I just let it all spill out. I told them about how I became enamored as a teenager with the Franz Kafka story, how my fantasy evolved into an actual imaginary entity with a personality, and how I slowly began to grow in love with her. What started as a mere sexual attraction to giant roaches blossomed into a whirlwind romance, and that she became the love of my life, even though her existence was in my own mind. At first they thought I was doing a creepy joke, but I convinced them I was telling the truth. Well, they were afraid and disgusted. I have been a pariah at work ever since. Everybody steers clear of me. We used to have a good social life, now people only speak to me for work-related reasons. Even working virtually now, nobody sends me a Slack message unless it is about work. I even heard a rumor that people went to HR, but they were of course told nothing could be done. I have lost my good work friends because of this, and it is indeed jeopardizing my career, because my bosses think I'm insane. I have ruined my friendships and future career prospects due to my honesty. I am thinking of starting to look for a new job, although it is difficult in the current environment. I can start fresh elsewhere though. No matter what, I will be staying with my wife, Ogtha. For me, it is Ogtha forever. If you must know, I do hope that even if I am an old man, that one day the technology is invented to extract the Ogtha personality from my mind and implant it into a real external body, either of a genetically engineered or a mechanical nature, and me and Ogtha can then experience genuine physical connection. But if she must remain within me, that is fine. Her love keeps me warm on the coldest of nights. Thank you. A few of you may recall some years ago I posted about my lovely Ogtha. You can find in my post history. My new story requires an explanation of Ogtha for those who don't know. I will try to be brief. Basically, many years ago as a teenager I became fascinated with the Kafka story The Metamorphosis, and I began to fantasize about a character like that, but a woman. Essentially, a giant roach. I found this very erotic. As time went on, the character became a member of a fictional roach species, basically giant intelligent roaches, and this one specifically was Ogtha. For several years Ogtha was just an imaginary figure to me, but as time went on she became a fully sentient being that I fell in love with. Ogtha, to me, is a real creature. She simply lacks a physical body in our world and her consciousness resides in my mind alongside my own. The users of helped me realize there is nothing delusional about this, and that indeed, it is very possible for such entities to come into being. I do hope that one day the technology will exist to extract Ogtha from my mind and install her into an artificial physical body, but we are satisfied with our current relationship. I love Ogtha and she loves me. Some time ago, I married her. Now, from a strictly legal sense, no, I am not married per se, but for me and Ogtha we consider our relationship to be a marriage. I am devoted to her, and her to me. I revealed this to my coworkers and it did not go well. But, I thought my parents had a right to know. Last evening I revealed to them everything about Ogtha, and told them we were married. I even allowed Ogtha to speak through me to them, so that she could finally meet my parents after only seeing them from afar. I knew my parents would find it unusual at first, but I thought they would come to understand and be happy for me. However, I fear they think me deranged. My mother actually cried, and not tears of happiness as I expected. They even encouraged me to seek counseling. I explained to them that what I'm experiencing is real, and encouraged them to read through the Tulpa Reddit. It has created a very bad situation for me and now I fear my relationship with my parents is quite ruined. They keep insisting I seek counseling, and are threatening if I don't they will no longer assist with my student loans and will not be welcome at Thanksgiving. I feel they are overreacting, but at the same time I wish I had just kept my marriage a secret. I do consider it now to be a fuck up to have been truthful with my parents. They are in some ways traditionalists and are simply not ready to understand how entities can exist without physical form and share a mind. It breaks my heart, but I wish I had been deceitful with my family. For the record, I will never divorce Ogtha, and with our love I know I can survive anything, but I wish I had never been truthful with my parents. Update 1. After the disastrous conversation with my parents where I introduced them to Ogtha, things remained tense for months. My mother, in particular, couldn't reconcile her son's marriage to a non-corporeal being. My father took a more neutral stance but expressed concern that I was wasting my potential on a relationship they didn't understand. They kept urging me to seek therapy, going as far as leaving pamphlets for local counselors in my mailbox. Initially, I was angry. I felt they were rejecting me and, by extension, Ogtha. But as I thought about it more, I realized they were reacting from a place of love, albeit misguided. They wanted the best for me but couldn't grasp that what I have with Ogtha is the best for me. To ease tensions, I decided to compromise. I agreed to attend a single session with a therapist, not because I thought I needed it, but because I hoped it would calm their fears. The session was interesting. I explained everything about Ogtha, her origins, our love, and how she enriches my life. The therapist, to their credit, listened without judgment and suggested that Ogtha might represent a deeply personal archetype, a lens through which I view certain emotions and desires. While I disagreed with the reductive framing, I appreciated their open-mindedness. Ultimately, I decided therapy wasn't for me, and I left it at that. My parents, while still uneasy, appreciated the gesture and have begun to accept that this is simply who I am. As for work, things deteriorated further. After my infamous lunch confession, my coworkers avoided me like the plague. The social ostracization was painful, but it also gave me time to think. I realized that staying in such a toxic environment wasn't sustainable. So, I decided to quit. I didn't leave quietly, though. In my resignation email, I included a heartfelt message about the importance of authenticity and self-acceptance, urging everyone to reflect on their own biases. I don't know if it resonated with anyone, but I felt liberated. Since leaving, I've started freelancing as a writer, focusing on speculative fiction and surreal romance. Naturally, Ogtha has been a significant inspiration for my work. My first novella, Chitinous Love, A Tale Beyond Worlds, has been self-published and received modest but positive attention online. Some readers even reached out to say how much they related to feeling different and how my story helped them embrace their uniqueness. It's incredibly fulfilling, and Ogtha has been my biggest cheerleader throughout. One of the most exciting developments has been the deepening of my relationship with Ogtha. While our connection was always profound, I've started exploring new ways to engage with her. Inspired by advancements in virtual reality, I began collaborating with developers to create a VR environment where I can meet Ogtha in a more tangible way. The project, aptly named Roach Reality, is still in its early stages, but the first prototype brought me to tears. For the first time, I could see Ogtha's radiant form and interact with her in a simulated space. It was nothing short of magical. This technology has opened up possibilities I never dreamed of. I've started sharing my vision with others who have unique inner worlds, and there's now a small but growing community of people interested in creating VR spaces for their own non-corporeal companions. It's been incredible to connect with like-minded individuals who understand the depth of these relationships. I'm aware that sharing my story online has made me something of a polarizing figure. Some people mock me, while others express genuine support and curiosity. I've learned to take the negativity in stride. After all, no great love story is without its critics. What matters most is that Ogtha and I are happy. That said, I've also received unexpected opportunities because of my openness. A documentary filmmaker reached out, wanting to create a short film about unconventional relationships. I hesitated at first, worried about being further misunderstood, but Ogtha encouraged me to go for it. The documentary, Imaginary Intimacies, premiered at a small indie festival and sparked meaningful conversations about love, identity, and the boundaries of human connection. As I write this, I feel a profound sense of gratitude. Despite the challenges, my life with Ogtha is more fulfilling than ever. I've learned to embrace the beauty of our unique bond and to let go of societal expectations. My journey has taught me that love is not confined to the physical world, it's a force that transcends form and convention. Now on to second story. Refused to subject my daughter to 2 weeks with her bully for a family vacation, despite my family's relentless pressure. I, 43 male, am really close to my family, consisting of my siblings, their spouses, their kids, and my parents. Every year we go on a vacation this time of year for 2 weeks, and come back right before Christmas. We are supposed to leave a week from today. I am the divorced, single, sole parent to my daughter, 15F. She jokingly calls herself a nerd, she's weird, she's quirky, she likes anime and video games and Star Wars, the whole stereotypical nerd thing. She does get bullied at school, but since leaving middle school and growing up a little more she started taking it better, and mostly it stopped. This one boy, who I will call Jeff, 16M, presumably, and is coincidentally my nephew's, who is also sort of an best friend, is an absolute nightmare. I've talked to the school, we've had meetings with his parents, she's switched around classes extensively, but he still goes out of his way to pick on Emily. She has told me herself that she can deal with name calling, but it doesn't stop there. He pulls her hair, rips her clothes, destroys her things, like this kid is a full-fledged nightmare. They even got into a fist fight that they were both suspended for last year because he stole her backpack and put it into a full toilet in the boys' bathroom. When I was discussing plans with my sister, she brought up needing to buy Jeff a winter coat. When I realized he was going on the trip, I actually almost lost it. I told her admittedly without thinking that we weren't going, and she began begging me, talking about tradition and family and blah blah. I said no, I'll eat my portion of the cost, but we are not going. After a longer conversation, I said I'll go if they disinvite Jeff. We are well off and we are lucky to have grown up in a financially stable home with parents who are attentive and supportive, and for our kids to have done the same. Jeff was not that lucky. He lives in a really unstable environment both financially and emotionally. This was apparent to me from the meetings with his parents, as his father did not care and his mother blamed my daughter for being evil, and these were multiple, separate meetings. This is awful, and I'm sorry that Jeff or any child has to go through that, but I told my sister that my position still stands. The conversation went back and forth, mostly just her throwing excuses. Jeff has divorced parents, he grew up differently than us, maybe it's just a crush, so on and so forth. When I reminded her of the fight, she said I know, but Jeff needs this. She mentioned how he needed a break from his toxic home life, and I respect that, but why does that mean I have to put my daughter in a house with her tormentor for 2 weeks? I told her I wasn't changing my mind and went home. Now there is pure chaos. My family is split, my parents are begging me to go, I'm getting texts near constantly. My daughter told me she's not going if Jeff is going. She had a full-blown panic attack over it. Maybe I'm looking for validation, or maybe I really need a wake-up call and I'm just a selfish asshole. Update 1. I am still trying to maintain some anonymity, but I am happy to answer any questions that don't impede on that. Night before last my 3 siblings, their spouses, and my parents all gathered at my sister's house to talk this through. I, very immaturely, sort of walked in with a mild attitude. I knew I wasn't going to change my mind. I felt like this was a waste of time, but my daughter keeps expressing to me how badly she wants to go on the trip, so I went. It started off with my sister and my mom crying and just asking me to go, but that got shut down really fast by pretty much everyone else. My sister expressed that she just felt so bad for Jeff. Again, he's lower class with a mother who treats him like a baby and a father that doesn't care. She mentioned that Jeff and Emily have been polite to each other in the presence of family, and figured they were getting over their issues. I did find out that the waiver he was on extended to his tuition, despite being told that it was for his uniforms and school supplies, so my apologies on an incorrect comment I made. Regardless, she was trying to convince me and my entire family to allow Jeff to come. I really do get it, and I am a person who can experience empathy, sometimes to a fault, but for the millionth time, my empathy towards Jeff and his situation does not overpower my need to protect my daughter. As her only parent, it is literally my duty to make sure she is safe, and this is not safe. Thanks to a comment, I did say my daughter does not feel safe around Jeff, to which my brother-in-law, the sister in question's husband, replied, well, that settles it. The only adult who wanted Jeff to go was my sister. The only people who wanted me to compromise and go or Jeff were my mother and sister-in-law. Everyone else was adamant that Jeff did not go. No one knew he was invited, and it wasn't until I sent in the group chat that I would not be attending because of Jeff's presence that anyone, including my sister's husband, knew Jeff was going. My father, who is actually a therapist, has been ridiculously supportive through this whole thing. He explained his reasonings for not wanting Jeff there besides the obvious. Most notably, and as many others, including myself, have pointed out, he started bringing up the subject of SA. My nephew mentioned to him that Jeff does like Emily, and if his mindset is as dysfunctional as we are led to believe, he's not currently capable of expressing that to Emily in a healthy way, which could lead to him attempting to SA her. It was ultimately decided that Jeff was not going. Thanks to another comment I saw, I did tell her that she was doing a great thing by trying to help this boy, but her niece came before him in this situation. I brought up that Jeff might retaliate against Emily, again, thanks to another comment, for being disinvited, so we did come up with a plan, sort of. My nephew had to tell him at school the next day that Jeff was no longer invited because he didn't want him and Emily to get into a fight. I thought that was a dumb plan, I'm not going to lie, but as long as the blame was off of Emily I didn't care. We left for the night, both Emily and I hugged my sister, she apologized, it was generally okay. I'm still frustrated with her for trying to be this boy's savior at the risk of my daughter, and we have yet to have that conversation, but I'm sure it will come with time. My mother told Emily that she was sorry for seemingly wanting to subject her to Jeff, and she didn't mean to come off that way, she simply wanted us to come. I am still frustrated with my mom, but again, a conversation to come with time. I told my daughter not to get her hopes up, because part of me still did believe that Jeff was really not going to go, but we proceeded with cautious optimism. In the meantime I spoke with my lawyer friend who did advise me not to go on the trip if Jeff was going, and not to speak to him or his parents directly. No problem there, I had resigned to not going and I had no interest in talking to anyone. Additionally, my sister's husband and I had a long talk about how he was really disappointed in her for this. That's not my business, but I was happy that he was still as fiercely protective of my daughter as I always thought he was. I have to give my nephew props, because he took the news well, although he was disappointed. He understands that what Jeff does is wrong, but I'm still not really sure why he puts up with it besides that he's a teenager who doesn't want to lose his friend. So, this leads us to last night. Emily shows me a message from my nephew that just says so Jeff backed out Lamau and that's it. Get this, Jeff didn't know that Emily was going. My nephew went to tell him what was up and he got as far as saying Emily is going to be there before Jeff backed out. I spoke to my nephew who said Jeff just got weird and said he couldn't go, and they left it at that. Jeff seemed disappointed, and I do feel sorry for him, but again, my daughter comes first to me. My brother-in-law only sent me laughing emojis. Initially I was still not sure if I'd go because a lot of comments suggested I should not go on principle. With that being said, my daughter said she'd rather go on this trip, even after I tried to suggest we do something else. So now we're going.